Yo, so excited. This is the very first episode of the Story Driven podcast. There's just so many incredibly inspiring entrepreneurs out there in the world, all just so driven. Oftentimes, the ones destined for success are the ones who have this deep why. They're this deep, passionate. Some people might look at them like they're crazy, but they are obsessed about what they're doing. They're obsessed about the impact that and not so much concerned about making the money, making, of course everyone wants to make a living doing what they love, but to them it's more about really those entrepreneurs who inspire me are the ones out there who are really in it because they're driven by something that they've either been through, by life experience, by adversity that they faced. And because of that adversity, because of those challenges they've overcome, they want to help others. They want to help others maybe who are going through those same or similar adversities, and they're looking for solutions. Back in 2019, when I founded Brand Story, my mission was to help our clients tell their stories and be seen and heard now. Now with Story Driven, the mission is exactly the same thing. So there's a lot of alignment here in what I'm doing with this podcast and my company Brand Story. And so they're very much, they come from the heart. This is my life's work. I'm so stoked to share it with you. And on our very first episode, we have Stephanie Zito. She is an incredibly gifted hypnotherapist. She's also a manifesting facilitator, helping her clients manifest their desires. But honestly, I see her as she is a guide. She is a spiritual and a business, very practical guide. And I know that there's a lot of stigmas around this, and some people might be hearing, oh my gosh, psychic medium, what does that mean? What kind of, is this going to be woo-woo? And I want to lay all of those to rest. And ultimately, this is where it comes, this is the point of this podcast and the point of storytelling is like, don't judge a book by its cover until when you hear Stephanie's story. She helps CEOs, she helps founders of international companies. She helps them get through their hangups, through their mental hangups, through their self-sabotaging, self-limiting beliefs. I think there's so much to learn from Stephanie Zito. All I ask is that we go into this conversation with an open mind and an open heart. So, Steph, what would you say to someone who, like I was not too long ago, maybe a few years back, was feeling stuck? Someone who's maybe feeling like even if they found a certain level of financial success, maybe on the outside to their family and friends, it looks like they're successful, but deep down inside, they're hurting, like they're living in a life that isn't theirs, that there is a sense of unalignment, a lack of purpose, or really that they're missing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it may not feel like this at the time for sure, but what I'm going to say is that this is your moment of pure brilliance. Like this is your ground zero moment. This becomes your moment of pure potential. So just because it's gotten to this point, like it's gotten to this point for a reason. And it just means that you've grown or you've become out of alignment with what it is you thought you wanted. And you're just moving to higher ground. So you just don't know exactly what that looks like yet. Inside, you actually do. It's just a matter of kind of digging in a little bit deeper to understanding that. And so I feel like the very first moment is just the moment of surrender to stop pushing the stuff that isn't working. And there's some great techniques to very quickly understand like what we're in, like I'm in for this, or I'm just not. And once you know that, it might still take some time and just allowing ourselves to be patient with ourselves to go through that process. But just getting that discernment, like, I'm done with this, like just admitting it to ourselves, allowing that truth to come through. Like, I am frustrated. I am done. This isn't for me anymore. I don't know exactly what it looks like next, but I do know it's definitely not this. there just becomes a freedom, and a groundedness in at least knowing that.
I love that. Let me just scooch in a little. No, I love that, because I would say we, having spoke with you about your story and how much I resonate from my story, I feel that, there is a moment where you sprint up this hill. Everyone has this moment in their life where they're sprinting up this hill, and maybe they're there because their parents told them that it's what they should do with their life, or maybe it's what they felt that they need to do in order to fit in, or to be seen as, normal, or someone who, for me, it was to really be seen, growing up with my, with my little brother. It was like, I often felt very much like alone. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like a lot of people, it's like chasing that fear of being alone. It's like, how do we avoid that? And it's like, well, you do what they want you to do, and I'd love to hear how maybe in your story, even from childhood, where you saw these patterns show up for you.
Yeah, well, and even before I get into that, I think one of the things that I hear you saying is something that's a common denominator for all of us, is at the end of the day, a lot of things that we're seeking that you may not feel fulfillment with is probably related to like these core fundamentals that we all want: love, connection, feeling seen. And so we might go after certain things like, going into advertising, and then you've got your ad on the Super Bowl, and you're sitting next to your dad, and he's not even looking at it. He can't even look at it, right? And so that desire for connection with that one person, right? You've done all this stuff to achieve that, and we can't bring other people to the table. Like, at some point we realize, like, I can't make other people be a certain way. And when we surrender to that, we might realize, like, that hole I'm trying to fill isn't for that person to fill anyway. Like, that's the whole thing. The whole thing is for us to find those things where we start in with, well, what looks like love to me? How can I love myself? How can I love those parts of myself that I'm so desperately trying to find other people to love for me? And so when we find that, then there's, like, again, this freedom in really doing the stuff that is within us, like our potential. And so for me growing up, and there's a long time where this was a pain point that I'm going to say. And then now it turns into like a huge piece of like my superpower, is that I always felt really different. Even as a young child, I would like be inside my head, like, what is going on? Like, I have these thoughts, but I'm this body, and I could feel myself inside myself, and I'm like, what is happening? And I just felt so different. Like, people didn't understand me. I thought differently. I got bullied when I was young. I just remember being in 7th grade and just so desperately wanting to get to the end of the school year. So either like I could hold on to these girls liking me, and it just stopped. And I remember writing in my diary and just grading my day of how good or bad of a day it was. And, at the time, it's like the 80s and 90s, like we all have our own abilities as parents. And so no fault to anyone in my life, I did feel very alone, and I felt very different. So I kind of went in high school into a place of hiding of sorts. Like, the less I could be seen, the better. Like, didn't probably say a word at lunch, just kind of skated through. And I found dance like as a form of expression, and I really got into it. So that was kind of my outlet, and I'm so grateful for my parents for investing in that. That carried me into college. And once I got into college, like a very small liberal arts school. It was like made for quirky people like myself. So I finally felt like, oh my gosh, like I found my people. We're just being ourselves, and we're just doing our thing. And it really helped me kind of open up a little bit more to who I am. And of course, like with everyone, again, it's been a journey. And I definitely have found parts of my life where I've been very grateful for doing what I've been doing. But there's also been a piece of like, oh, it's not quite it. I just haven't quite landed. I'm not quite there. Like the places that I lived, I lived in Africa in the Peace Corps. I lived in Maine working for a leadership school, went to grad school in Virginia. Like I've been in Wyoming. I've been Once I got to California, I really felt like, wow, this feels like home. I just couldn't quite understand how I could make it work. Like, how would I afford it? Like, what was I actually going to do with my quirky stuff? And I just was always like not quite hitting the mark, and I loved everything I did. Like I worked in outdoor education, wilderness therapy, a lot of like transformative work for people. And yet it just never quite felt like home. Went to Wyoming, went to Utah. I always wanted to be in California. And there was a particular job at that time like that I knew was my dream job. I just couldn't quite see it. So my journey took me to Utah, working with a therapeutic boarding school, which was great. I worked like 4 days on. I had like 8 days off in between, and it was pretty nice.
That's nice.
And I was taking the kids that were really failing, like they were just failing out. They were making really terrible decisions for themselves. We would take them out on these journeys in the wilderness for like a long weekend. And the point was really to be like coming back home to themselves. Like, what do you really want here? Regardless of other people, like what's going on for you. So I loved it. I just knew at some point, like I wanted some more stability, wanted to probably have a family. Like I knew there was going to be something else. So that journey actually started me on a journey that took me way off course to bring me way back on course. And that's the journey that took me to meeting someone at the time who I started dating. And he asks me to move to Kentucky with him. And he's starting his PhD, and I'm like, well, this is love, and I should move for love, and this is what I'm gonna do. So I basically leave the job that I really did love in Utah, which I think probably would have kept me in Utah a lot longer. And I moved to Kentucky, and it's not working out. And in fact, on the way there, we're arguing on the phone, and I hit black ice, and I crash my SUV. It hits a guardrail, and I feel incredibly grateful for like a couple seconds. I'm not down the hill, and no one's finding me. And I'm facing the opposite direction on the road, and I hear this voice in my head say, you don't have to go, you can turn back. And I remember saying to myself, like, no, I'm gonna keep driving. And I've lost my bumper, and the police show up, and I can still drive my SUV, so I keep driving. And I make it to Kentucky. And long story short, this is the thing about, I think the universe guiding us, even when we get off course. Like, I could not get hired anywhere in Kentucky. I was still making money. I was still working for this school in California, like doing off-site work for them. So I was still making money. I still, for a while, was going back to my job in Utah because I had so much time off. I could travel back and forth, and I wasn't letting go. I wasn't letting go of these things, and I'm crying all the time. I'm not sleeping at night. Why? Because I'm out of alignment. So I get myself a coach, a somatic coach, and she helps me really like come back to center, right? Like my center. And it's painful because I find that at the time I realize I can't even say I love myself. Like it's too painful to even say that. So, and that's okay. It's part of the journey because recognizing that and recognizing those pain points helped me come to that place where I knew what I was about. I got very clear on what I did want. I got very clear on the kind of relationship I did want to be in. And that helped me make the decision to leave. And that wasn't easy. I mean, there were so many times, like if I had gotten one job, I probably would have just stayed in Kentucky. I had that thought, well, I could just stay. I could get a place here. I'm already here. I mean, no offense to any state, but it's just was not where I wanted to be. And basically, I feel very grateful. And then, at some point, that SUV completely broke down, and I got a Chrysler Sebring convertible, which I loved. I packed as much as my stuff that I could in that Chrysler and drove cross country to California. And this is the thing. I had one person, my friend who was the owner of that therapeutic school, who said, just come stay with me. Just come stay with me, teach a few yoga classes at the school, figure it out. And it was just having like that one earth angel, that one person to give me that inroad. So I left and I went, and that's where things kind of became this luge, like manifesting, things like lining up one after the other, because I was so clear. I got to surf every day, which I adored. I was working for the school teaching yoga. She hired me on full time, which was like literally like my dream thing at the time. This is exactly what I wanted. within 3 months, I met my now husband, who you just met, and here we are. I mean, it'll be 14 years coming up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you got a boy.
And a girl. You didn't
And
see
a
her.
girl.
I already got her off
That's
to school
right.
this morning.
That's right. Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
he's awesome as well. Your husband is awesome.
He is. Yeah.
So how does one go from almost, I'd say, plummeting off a cliff and then hearing this inner voice? I'm curious, before we get into, how that occurs, that, I mean, for some people go their entire lives and don't find it. For some people, it takes a long time to really
stay in Kentucky, so to speak.
Exactly. Stay in Kentucky their whole lives until at the end of the life.
You're exactly right.
You're
Yeah.
in a place of regret. And that's, I think, to me, it's like, that is my greatest fear. And I hear a lot of people will say, well, that's too scary. Leaving the job to pursue the passion is too scary.
Yes.
Chasing the dream is too scary. To me, what's even scarier than that is ending up at your deathbed and going, uh-oh,
I wish.
There's I can't go back now. And
What if?
What if I would have?
If only.
If only.
Yeah.
If only.
Exactly.
It's very scary. And there was that guardrail moment where there's that inner voice. What do you feel? Why do you feel, and you included, at that moment, we decide to still go forward to Kentucky?
We don't trust or really understand the depth and greatness that's on the other side of not making that decision. We just don't understand. All we can see is like literally the dullness that's in front of us, but that dullness feels safe at the time. And we just don't, we're not in that expansiveness. I was not in the expansiveness in that moment of what truly was available to me. I knew what I did want. I knew exactly what I wanted, right?
Was there an element of, because I feel like for some, including myself, there's that voice, and sometimes it's hard to discern which voice is intuition and which voice is fear, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, is that just fear talking? Should I go to Kentucky because that's the courageous move?
Well, and I think the thing with the fear is that as I look at that, guardrail moment, there's some other things at play. There's like how I grew up, and I grew up with parents that like you really stick it through, and if you're in love, right, you figure it out and you kind of communicate. And so there's all these things about the stick with itness, which is not a bad quality. It's just like we have these things like from upbringing or whatever these motives are that make us want to keep going that direction that is the dulled direction, And so I think what you're getting into is exactly what I wish we all learned when we were in grade school, like from the get-go. It's that we have not only an inner voice, we have guides, right? And so if we can lean into that, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do that, like that is going to be the guidance that we're not asking our friends. We're not actually having to go to the therapist every time. Like we have that within, that discernment. And there's other things like since then that have definitely helped me make like amazing decisions, like scary ones, but in favor of that leap, And so the first thing that I'd say is to meditate. Everyone's like, not everyone, but if you don't meditate, you're probably like, it doesn't work for me, or I don't have time. Well, guess what? This is your like legit secret sauce. Meditation is the free $1 million element that is going to help you get to that place of discernment. And so when you meditate, you start to hear that outer voice, the one that's like, what am I going to have for dinner? And when do I have to pick up the kids? And you shouldn't do that. And what's wrong with you about doing this? And you start to hear it. You're like, oh, now you're separating things out. You're just stilling that voice that's like da 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 da, and then the voice that can hear it, right? I say the voice that can hear that voice is a bit closer to the inner voice, the intuitive voice. Now you're the observer. Now you're the observer of the monkey mind and all the things and all the people and all the stuff. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna watch you. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of meditation when you first start, is you're just observing. You don't have to have, people think like, oh, I have to just clear my mind. Guess what? Trying to clear your mind is going to be the biggest obstacle to actually clearing your mind. Mm. The first step is just like lean into it. It's the same thing with fear. Like look at it, observe it. Like, what's underneath that? What's really going on here? Fear, what is it that you really need? There's always something underneath it. So what we really want to do is to separate out that voice that's trying to tell you all the things to do and tell you what you should be afraid of and why you can't do this, and also the voice as the observer. So once you have the observer, like that's very close to your inner truth, your intuition. Then there's some other techniques we can do too. There's a technique I teach my clients called the sway test. And it is like the most rapid way to get past all the confusion and overthinking and get right to the heart of exactly what it is you do want to do. So, like for instance, getting into the house we're sitting in right now, we've been in this house since April of this past year. And this was a huge decision. We were living in a smaller home that we had purchased, which we're very grateful for. But with the 2 kids getting older, we were kind of outgrowing it. So talk about manifesting. I wrote down on a piece of paper what we wanted out of a home, just kind of on a whim, December of last year. And we wanted 2 stories and an office space with a yoga room for me, an office for my husband, like a nice view. And 2 weeks later, my husband, we hadn't been talking about getting a house at all. He says, hey, we should go look at this house, like this house. So we do, we come, we look at it, we put an offer in, and then we kind of freak out because we have a great interest rate and all the reasonable, rational reasons why we should stay in the smaller home, right? Interest rate is really great. This is a higher mortgage, right? Like all the things. So I'm not sleeping that well at night, which is okay. I understand it's like part of the situation. And we pull out of the deal. And then we have regrets. So in the meantime, this is where like things that are meant for you, like they will be there for you, right? So long story short, we think about it. And in the meantime, the owners get another buyer. And so we put in a backup offer. And our realtor is like, it's never done until it's done. So long story short, that buyer, they can't perform on their escrow, whatever. And so the sellers go out of that deal and they come back to us. So this house came back to us like 3 different times.
Wow.
And in the meantime, I did this sway test, like checking in with my intuition, like, is this for the best and highest good? Is this the best and highest good decision? Is this the best and highest good house, like for us? And I kept getting really clear answers, like despite the fear that also is going to show up. It's not like you're going to hit a certain amount of money in your bank account. It's not like you're going to hit a certain marker and that fear is going to completely go away. Like fear is, I would never want fear to go away. Like it's showing up for a reason. It's like telling me some things that I probably want to consider. It's like very normal. It's just, we can get our extra edge on how we deal with fear through these more intentional ways of going about life. Like what I like to help my clients with is just having this extra edge through intuition, through intention.
I love that. I think that's a great spot to get into the work you do with the clients. And I mean, I think the first place to start is how you got into that work. I see it as a culmination of your life journey. I see how many of the previous jobs that you had and the previous experiences with Kentucky all aligned, and all that life story, we don't realize it at the time, is preparing us for, I think, that purpose. So I can see so clearly in your story. I'm curious, what got you toward the work you do now? Why you chose that line of work, and just love to hear more about what you do as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we could start with the why. We'll start with the why. Yeah.
The why, I think, goes back to after I was in the Peace Corps, I got my master's in conflict resolution. And when I was studying conflict resolution, I really realized that I wasn't satisfied with people, going to mediation and just dividing up their stuff. I was like, well, how are we really feeling on the inside? Like, are we good? Like, have we resolved this conflict for ourselves? Like, how do we feel? And so I got into that study. And I think that's what brought me into the transformative work, right? The inner work, because, why I do this is so I can help us get really aligned on the inner, so that we're not in conflict with our inner world and our outer world. Because when we're in conflict in our inner world, it's going to show up in our outer world. It's going to show up in our relationships. It's going to show up in our results. Like we might on the surface say, I want to make this certain amount of money in my business this year, but that could be a real struggle bus along the way. And it could actually be really seamless. And when we can resolve the inner world, then we can get really clear on, well, why do I want this? Why do I want this result? Why do I want this car? Why do I say I want this? And sometimes what we're saying we want actually is about the underneath thing. For instance, like that example with, doing the commercial and the dad, like, do I really want my commercial on Super Bowl? Well, of course, it sounds amazing, but underneath it, what do I really want? It's my dad's acknowledgement. It's my dad's. So if I can resolve that piece, then I may or may not even want to be in advertising to begin with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's that underlying. I think the reason a lot of people get into a certain career is the parent, they wanted that parent approval. Mm-hmm. That approval means love,
mm-hmm.
Or it feels like love. And there's just so many who I know, even in my personal life, who the more as they grow through that experience, there is a realization at a certain point. You can only go down a certain path so long if it's not truly who you are and what you want to do. Mm-hmm. For a long time, I went into the film industry, and for years I was, in situations where it was like, why am I really doing this? And it was that voice in the back of my head going, this really isn't where I see myself. Mm-hmm. But all these excuses would come up afterwards, right? It's
exactly.
Like, okay, you got to suppress that because this is what they say. Oftentimes this is what society says you have to do after college. Right. This is what college said you have to do. This is what your parents said you have to. All these other people versus what do I feel like doing right now?
Right.
And for me, I think it took. I think for a lot of people, it takes a sort of traumatizing or rock bottom moment. Mm-hmm. For me, it was that moment where my family almost lost the house. Mm-hmm. And I've had a few moments like this through, my own personal rock bottom moments where I was just in the financially worst situation of, not where's rent going to come from in my early 20s, mm-hmm. Going, what's next? And really at those moments, you realize there's no such thing as security. There's no such thing as safety,
right?
In this life, mm-hmm. you can be in you can have a pension, or you can have, you have the 9 to 5, you got the the steady thing, mm-hmm. and it feels safe until it's not. And then you realize, well, if I'm going to be able to fail, if I'm going to fail doing something I don't even love, or doing something that's not even for me, mm-hmm. then why the heck aren't I why am I doing this in the first place? And for me, that I'm curious with you, mm-hmm. And the work you do, if this is like that main struggle you see, and how you help your clients and those you help, how you help them to identify, mm-hmm. and overcome.
Yeah, well, I work with a lot of women who are at the executive level or CEOs of their own company or looking to leap into entrepreneurship. And this is exactly it. A lot of times, like, they have decided to kind of move out of their career and move into something else. And even kind of come to grips sometimes even with being a CEO of like that deep, because there's a lot of pressure, like that deep understanding, like, is this actually what I want to be doing? And I think, like, to not be afraid of those questions is the biggest expansion we can get into, because there's so much that constricts us, right? And we're living in that constriction, that fear, like we're just not allowing ourselves to be open to the potential. And that's what's always lit me up, I think, for a very long time, even before I really considered coaching like I do right now, is just whenever I hear someone with this idea of what they want to do. Like a friend wanted to like raise chickens and stuff. I'm like, I'm so excited for them. Like, that sounds amazing. That's your thing. You love that. Like, I'm thrilled for them. Like, I just love seeing people fully in their expression. Like you see a dancer on stage or like a singer and you're just so enwrapped with who they be. Like, we all have that. We all get to be that. That's exactly what we're here for. And so I'm here to help us like distill and like pull that through for ourselves. And along the way, when those fears come up, because they do, They always do, to help us through that. So we don't just get stuck there in that limbo state of, well, I said I wanted to start my podcast, or I said I wanted to do this leadership education, but well, wait a second. What is that going to mean about me if I fail? What are people going to think about me? All those things, those shadows, like they're going to come up when you come into that fullest expression that you want to be. Like I know they did for me. And for me, I have kind of a similar story about how I started into coaching, because when I met Mark, I think that I was kind of contemplating it. I was working for that school that I loved, and I was in Orange County, he was in La Costa, so it made complete sense for me I'm like, I'll move to La Costa. I have no problem with that. So it's kind of like rebirthing what I do and figuring it out, which I feel very, very grateful for. And so then we had our daughter Bella, and I feel very grateful that, mostly I was a stay-at-home mom. So I was teaching yoga, and I feel like some of that coaching was coming through the yoga because, you can like give some affirmations and you can do something nice during the Shavasana, but it's not really coaching. And it wasn't until Mark had gotten laid off that it was sort of like this come to terms moment with like, well, what are you actually going to do, Steph? Like, what are you really going to do? You say you want to coach, right? Like, this is it. Like, he actually started freelancing at the time too, which is what he wanted. So it was sort of, we get these red lights that give us the green light moments. And for us, it was like a huge red light. Like he lost his job. We did go into a bunch of debt. And it's actually when I made the decision to start coaching. I was like, well, it's either this or what. I'm going to get like a full-time job and take me away from my daughter. And none of that's what I want. We had our son on the way. It was like a very stressful time, very stressful. And I can't say, to be honest, that at that time, like we were both exactly on the same page with me even doing this. Like talk about, this happens a lot. Your spouse, your significant other, your family, like they may not get it. But when you really feel that truth, like you can see that light within, like that's what becomes the most important. It's not looking outside for that support. It's being okay with someone not being okay with what you're doing. And so that's when I found, at the time, this was like 2016, my coach, John Block, who we both know. And he helped me understand what to charge and how to be, to go on stage and to speak. And so I became a speaker's coach. Like I didn't really know exactly what to call myself or what exactly it was I was even doing. And so what I found was the clients who came to me, we all were doing the same thing. We weren't actually doing the speaker's coaching. We were doing the inner work. We were doing like the undercurrent work of like what they really wanted. We were getting to the depths of like, who are you? What do you really want to do? Getting that discernment. And so I realized like, this isn't about speaking necessarily. It's about getting into that alignment. And along the way, I also realized like, I just know there's a way to get quicker to the heart of what's blocking someone. And so of course, what fell into my lap, which showed up for me, was a training to do intuitive energy scans. And so I took that training, and I, through my yoga training, had already gotten accustomed with and knowing the chakra system, the energy system through the chakras. And that was kind of the skeleton, like that was the baseline for this energy scan. And so I put my ego aside that I might be wrong or I might get it wrong or not do it right. And I started doing these free energy scans, and they would really be spot on. They would show a lot of truth to someone. They would really show the truth of what was blocking someone. And I loved it because we were like so quickly getting down underneath that thing that person was trying to really move through, right? That thing that was blocking them from what they really desired. And that really just started to just unroll my intuition. I feel like doing that helped me unlock that part. And once we started to really kind of use Facebook more for business and marketing and Instagram and being more visible on social media, I had to go through like another iteration of this, of being visible, because I really stepped into my intuition, now calling myself a psychic because that's what I do, a medium, all those things. And I know that I have some people very close to me in my life who really don't understand what that means. They don't maybe understand how it comes from love. Perhaps they think that it butts up against their own religious beliefs. And so I had to have some I had to come to terms with, am I going to hide myself or like just block some people. Like I'm just blocking energy if I'm doing that. I'm just focusing on fear versus focusing where I'm really coming from, which is love. And so I just got really clear on if someone doesn't like this or they don't understand it or they need to reject me, like that was like talk about like a big, pain point was this idea of being abandoned or being rejected. Like that was my thing. Right. So once I got through that, like, I feel like you become unstoppable. Like it doesn't matter. If I get a trolley comment, it just means I'm getting more visible. Like I don't take it personally. Knowing I come from love, like if I release trying to control what someone thinks about me or believes about me. If they see me for who I truly am, then great. Like I will embrace that. But if that's not available to them, it's not mine to control, right? So there's a lot of peace that comes from that. And so what also happened was I really drew into my life this group of women, this soul group of women who are my friends now that I didn't have before because I allowed myself to fully express who I was. And other women who are like, ooh, I'm into that too. I do cards. I was like, I had no idea. We have this like amazing group of women that have come together that I feel like I was able to attract, versus being rejected or looking for friendships in ways that really weren't that deep. And now being able to kind of really come to like the heart of what I'm here to do. And I actually feel like there's going to be something more in the future, but right now I know I've completely landed. Like I for all the times I was like, I'm almost there. I'm kind of there with the yoga. I'm almost there with the wilderness therapy. Like I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. This is like fully my soul's expression in the world.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I could tell when I met you, it was such a quick guided meditation, hypnosis, wealth hypnosis, I believe was what the term for the session was. It was like 30 minutes and I cried. And it's funny because I went in a little bit skeptical. I think, just from the stigmas around things like hypnosis and what people tend to just have a general idea of what it is. They see it in the cartoons or the movies and they're like, oh, this is like a form of magic or something, is what some people think. And there was that in the back of my head going, okay, well, I'm just going to go into this open-minded because John and Monty, right, as our mutual, John Block, I've known him since 2019. Yeah. I know that they bring together, I know that they are like totally
you can trust us. Like,
I can trust them. I can trust who they bring to the table. And so I was like, okay, let's see what this is about. And it was a really, I know it's called hypnosis, but the way I see it is targeted meditation.
Yes.
It really felt like just a guided meditation that was almost like you were almost like getting us into our subconscious, not to speak for you about what you do.
I love hearing this.
On my end, my experience was like, it was almost as if you got us into our subconscious, kind of that place where we lucid dream, where our fears maybe live a little bit, and also our dreams. And when we were in that space of total relaxation through that guided meditation, then it was almost like I felt like you were just like a surgeon, like just through language, being able to go in there and start helping us rewire those subconscious things in the back of our mind, that whether it's from childhood trauma, and I don't think that it's trauma. I don't think it's that we're traumatized. I think for a lot of us, like for me, I didn't consider myself traumatized as I had a pretty good upbringing, all things considered. It was tough, having a little brother with autism and feeling oftentimes different than the rest of the world, feeling sometimes alone, oftentimes left to my own devices, though my parents tried their best. But there was this deep sense of, I think, habits and patterns that had become my defense mechanisms as a kid, whether it was escaping into video games, being the class clown at school to try to get attention, to feel a sense of family or feel a sense of community when I didn't feel at home, that I had the most time with my family, and to go through that and in 30 minutes, I mean, I don't think I had ever in such a short period of time felt like I was almost some of those old patterns of thought that were no longer serving me. Some of those old habits, were really like released. Yeah. Like I was just able to let them go, And so I remember once that happened, then we got into the vision casting. Then we got into the speaking about the future. What really, and speaking to a future that suddenly with all of those blocks cleared became extremely way more palpable. It became way more believable that this future is totally within reach. And it's like these blocks that are in the back of our subconscious keep us for some reason, for whatever reason, whether it's to feel safe or to feel a sense of security or whatever, make us forget about those dreams so that we can maybe, I don't know, maybe we can feel a sense of, maybe there's a fear of success. I think for me, that was one of them.
Yes.
A fear of, well, what happens if I'm successful? Then I'm no longer me. Are people still going to like me, or are they going to become envious? Are they going to become jealous? Am I going to lose my current friends? Is that going to, all of those things that hold us back, that come from fear, that targeted hypnosis and meditation for me was just a game changer.
I'm so glad. It's like the best to hear this. Yeah.
And so now we're working together.
Right, yes.
And so basically, here's your testimonial.
Thank you very much.
Off the cuff testimonial. But no, I'm so glad that we started working together and mutually, and just finding ways to help each other. And that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Is that win-win scenario. And then also the fact that now I'm getting to help share your story, and I'm super stoked.
Okay. We rise together.
Yeah, just kind of broke the fourth wall there, but yeah, a little meta. Yeah. But no, I want to hear now from your perspective though. That was kind of like my experience.
That's great.
From your end, for you, we've still got a lot to go get into. We've only had 2 sessions together, so I'm curious what it looks like. What does your client journey look like? What is your method? There's like a big question mark, I think, for people behind this type of work that I'm excited to dive into. Yeah.
So what's interesting is I've had some clients even within 1 or 2 sessions have like major like life-changing breakthroughs. So they are, and so what's so interesting is, you talked about hypnosis, and I will say that when I was learning hypnosis, to be, trained in it, I was like, this is basically like manifesting through your subconscious. This is like a gateway to your subconscious to help you manifest. So all that stuff you're doing on the surface, if you actually just do hypnosis, it'll just allow you to be aligned from within to do the manifesting. So, I've had clients basically, start be getting divorced and worried about the money they're going to make, to be able to come to like a place of peace and then literally receive a job offer. Like, hey, we have this job for you. Wouldn't it be so interesting for you to take this job? And it's like the exact amount they need, being gifted money, gifting a trip to go travel, like everything they were kind of wanting, they're like, oh, it showed up. Like I hear that very frequently. And so, there's no timeline upon which this has to happen for people. But what I've come to is basically, I'd say like my 3C method. And that's starting out with getting clarity. What I want to begin with is I want the clarity of what you really want, and also kind of the clarity of what's underneath it. Oh, do you have a fear of success? Okay, well, what are you afraid of if you succeed? Oh, you're afraid of losing friendships. Well, you're afraid of losing connection. You're afraid of losing love. What if we can match up? So the subconscious is really run by these certain like prerequisites, I'd say, right? One of them is this idea of like alignment. Like it will always keep you in alignment, the subconscious will. And so this is why like hypnosis is so important, I think, to the process, because if it's really important to you to have connection, and that's like a safety thing. I feel safe having connection. I will never not have connection. then I will never succeed to that level because doing that will make me lose connection. Or I will get to that level and I will sabotage it because I am seeing it play out that I am losing the connection. But through hypnosis, for instance, if you can align that safety with the money, with the success, then you're good. Like you're like, oh, the subconscious is like, check, we're good. We'll just go for it. Like you literally open the doors, like you just pave the way, right? Versus fighting it. All that stuff that isn't working is because it's out of alignment with some part of your subconscious. And subconscious is the place that's running the show. So we get that deep clarity. We get that clarity for like not just what you want for tomorrow, but what you want for 5 years from now. We like look into the future. We bring it back to the present, to the actions you can be taking now. And then we get to work on the clearing. Well, what's in the way? What are the fears? What are the doubts? Like, what is the inner world telling you? And that's what we do through hypnosis, and also a process called going into the Akashic records. So that's kind of like the idea that your soul has these records for your entire journey. And when you're not sure, like, well, why am I so afraid of this? Or why do I keep getting stuck on this? There's this process, kind of is like a guided meditation of sorts to help you access this whole library of your soul and get these answers. And my clients get like the deepest wisdom, like the most satisfying wisdom comes through that's life-changing because then they know, like they have the answer. They don't have to keep ruminating about it, right? They know. They're like, oh, I already got that answer. I know. And then we move into the creation, or I like to think the co-creation with the universe, because there's the actions you're taking and there's also the trust and knowing of what you are going to receive, right? It's like I am taking the action and the universe is lining some things up for me to receive. The clients, the situations, the synchronicities to help support me. When I'm in alignment, and this is my soul's expression, the universe will show up to support me.
That's awesome. So those are the 3 C's.
Yeah,
that's
they
amazing.
are.
I'm curious what you would say to someone who, you know, is at a point in their life where they're ready to take that jump, but they don't quite know where to start. They don't quite know where to begin. Maybe there is some takeaways. Maybe there is something they could apply today. I know the sway method was one. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if there's anything else that maybe you would suggest pointing them towards, whether it was starting out with some form, you know, I know we've also talked about meditation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, I think I'm just thinking about, you know, mid-50s mm-hmm. woman who maybe went down this path into, you know, a toxic workplace, a work environment that she is just no longer feeling like mm-hmm. this is, she's not happy in it. She knows maybe she can keep going so mm-hmm. that she can get her retirement, you know, and then, you know, it's only 7 more years until mm-hmm. I can finally breathe. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious what you would say to someone that's there. It's like, dude, 7, 8 more years, not living in alignment could feel like a lifetime, you know, mm-hmm. and also it could be hell.
Absolutely. Right. And there's like the hell that we just tolerate because it's what we know. It's like the norm. And I just look back, for instance, at like when I left Kentucky, like I could not be more grateful. Like there was a moment, there was a glitch in the matrix where I would have stayed there. Right. And it was not for me. You know, me putting on suits, I have broad shoulders. Suits are not good. Like, it's just my rhythm is very different, and I've gotten to create that. And I'm so grateful I made that happen in conjunction with the universe. And one of the very first things that I learned that I love to do, it's one of the first things I do with my clients, so you get a taste of this here, is to just dive into, if you were to say, and I know this is going to be a very different way we speak because it's an embodiment. It's an embodiment for the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotions. It's saying, I am a commitment to, and I believe we did this. It's like, I am a commitment to, what am I a commitment to right now? Am I the big picture thing, like an umbrella under which other stuff can fall? Is it, I'm a commitment to my peace, I'm a commitment to my happiness? And I'll tell you, especially women who are used to taking care of other people, they're gonna say something, I'm gonna call you out right now, that's about somebody else. It's gonna be something for your kids, it's gonna be something for your family, it's gonna be something for somebody else. I'm like, That's great. I appreciate that. I know that's in your heart. And let's come back to you. What are you a commitment to for you right now? Are you a commitment to caring for yourself? Are you a commitment to thriving? Because that is going to be the alignment, the underlay under which you can then start to discern your decisions, right? I'm a commitment to thriving, right? If I'm stressed out, I'm unhappy at my job, and I'm coming home and I'm having a couple glasses of wine every night because I'm unhappy and I want to just forget about that. Oh, and then I wake up and I don't feel super great. Is this aligned with my commitment to thriving? No? Okay, well, maybe I'm going to make the choice to drink something else in the evening or do something different, or maybe sit with that uncomfortable feeling, or maybe meditate and do something that's going to replace that. That's the first step. It's like these little minutia, these little things, they cascade into the big decisions. Because once you start to get into that commitment to thriving and you make one decision, one choice, one action that's going to support that, perhaps that commitment to thriving, you're going to take a walk 3 times a week. You're going to go to an exercise class twice a week. You're going to go meet up with a friend once a week. You put that on your calendar. You put the date and the time you're showing up for yourself. And then you just check in. Did I do it? Did I not do it? Just neutrally. If I'm not doing it, why? What's getting in the way, right? Is it just, am I overwhelmed? Am I afraid of it's gonna feel like on the other side if I make this change? But you just start with that commitment, because then you have information. Am I aligned with my commitment to thriving? Oh, I have this toxic boss, and he keeps talking to me, or she keeps talking to me in a really disrespectful way. Is this aligned with my commitment to thriving? Is going into this toxic workplace aligned with my commitment to thriving? You start to realize what's out of alignment. And then that just becomes a cascade effect to help you make the decisions to help you get into alignment.
Nice. I love that. And I think that, that's one end of the spectrum, is someone who's in the, maybe a workplace. It's just total out of alignment, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I see the majority of people around.
Right.
And it's so sad.
Well, there's a reason for this. I mean, if we really look at this, right? I'm talking about the world of intuition. And let's look at where, talk about even the Industrial Revolution and school and FDR and the school system. The school system, what are you doing? You're going to a place Monday through Friday. Oh, and you get to do work after you leave at home. You get to do work after work. We're groomed to this certain way where we're just making money for other people. It's just the system, right? So I'm just saying.
We can get into this. I mean, Rockefeller said, who was one of the founders of the education system, I'm not looking to build a country of thinkers. I'm looking to build a country of employees.
You know it.
Right? And so,
yeah.
So, I'm curious though, because that's one end of the spectrum,
right?
And we talked about, I do believe in the habits, right? That our habits turn into, our thoughts become our actions, become who we are, become our future, become everything. And so for me, it starts with, shifting that. You can't shift, the emotional state to waking up and feeling like crap in the morning, but you can.
Well, you can
start
actually.
To shift. Oh, well, I'm saying
I have another tool.
That initial grogginess is what I'm saying. Maybe you can.
Yeah.
But at first it's realizing, for me, it was realizing that, okay, there's nothing I can do about how I feel, but there is something I can do about my response to that, and start changing my actions.
Yes.
That is what you can change. And that's where, for me, it starts, or it started, but I'd love to hear.
Well, I can think of, again, this is at this point, there's been so many people I've worked with that I have these patterns that I work with, the system that I work with now. And so I can think of, certain clients that have come to me miserable. And another shift that we can do is something called vision casting. Right? And so we can do that for the future, and we can do that daily. And I know when I learned this, it was at a really challenging time. It was during COVID times when my kids were schooling at home, and my son was really young. He was in first grade, and it was incredibly challenging. And I'm trying to work, and he's got 3 hours of school that I think I have to do my thing, and he constantly is needing me. And so I find myself getting aggravated, and it's showing. And so he's crying, and my husband's trying to work, and it's just because never go back to that time. But I learned this. I learned vision casting, and I would write down in the morning what I had going on, and I would write down in the present tense with the emotions that I desired, how I wanted that to go. So if I had a client, like I would write down what that would look like I'm fully present and engaged and available for my client for the best and highest good. Even what I'm having for breakfast, I was like just eating goldfish for lunch, right? So I was like, oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to eat a colorful, vibrant, healthy lunch that will carry my energy through the rest of the day. It feels so great and nourishing to eat this food, right? That'd be something that I would write down. It's really important to write it down, right? And so even with my son, I wrote down, right now, if my son, if he needs me during his homeschooling, I'm super calm and present and ready to help him in whatever way he needs, because that's what he needed. And so when I first started doing it, I caught myself that first day. And like the seventh time he's calling for me and I'm like getting aggravated. I could feel it. I'm like, wait a second. Like the program started telling me, this is not what you said you were going to do. You said you were going to be calm and available for him. And so it changed my energy instantly. And because it changed my energy, it changed his energy. And I really kid you not, from that moment forward, our whole dynamic shifted. It just shifted into a place where, because we feed off each other. He was more calm. He was more available to learn. It didn't matter to me. I was like, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm here for it. Right. And so what you find is by doing this, like you're able to be more productive. You're actually doing things for yourself that you might not have even caught that you were missing, like eating a healthy lunch versus just snacking, drinking enough water. And some of my clients, like one who's a CEO, she's used it for going into like big meetings with investors, things where you might feel like a little nervous or, you really want things to go well. You want to have a certain outcome. So you're not trying to control the outcome, but you can look at your desired state going in. What intention are you bringing to it? And at the end of the day, you just check in, right? Did I do it? Did I not do it? Oh, I said I was going to meditate for 10 minutes. Did I actually do it? And then you look at, well, why? Why not? Did I just say I was too busy? Why did I avoid meditating? Did I say I didn't have time? Okay, what am I really avoiding? Is it just is it uncomfortable? I don't want to think about a certain thing. You just, again, you get really clear. You get to the truth of what's going on for you.
Yeah. For me, it's a lot of asking why, like you said, asking why. Well, why aren't I doing this? Why aren't I eating healthier? Why aren't I going to the gym regularly? I have the time. And oftentimes that is the main excuse that I'll hear when asking someone, well, yeah, like you want to do that. Like why aren't you doing that? Daily.
Right.
Well, we don't have the time, you want to,
Right.
I'll hear, you want to get into music. Well, yeah, get started, man. Like, why haven't you started yet? Cause say I've been wanting to do it for years. I'll hear that, but wanting, yeah, but, or, oh yeah, like I'm getting started. I got all the equipment, but I just haven't really gotten started yet. Why not? And it's every excuse in the book oftentimes that we'll find, to avoid, doing the thing we know that's going to change our life.
Well, this boils back to hypnosis, and it boils back to, if you think of this idea of like our body is like a ship, right? And so the captain is kind of like I'd say our prefrontal cortex, or like the mind that says like, I should go to the gym, right? But we've got this crew. And if the crew has got some kind of reason in the background that they're not going to do something, right? If the captain's like, let's steer left. And the crew's like, no, there's an iceberg there. I'm going to run into that. They're not going to go there. They're going to steer right. So the crew, which is the subconscious, is really what's running the show. So we got to keep the crew happy and also realize like, well, what's going on for the crew? Like, are they afraid of something that's going to happen? Like the subconscious is really what matters here. So I think a lot of times we go only with that prefrontal cortex, with the mind that says like, I'm going to work out, I'm going to get healthier, I'm going to eat well. And then you do it for a day or two. And then like the shoes are just like sitting by the door, and like you just hit the snooze button one more time. So you have to ask the crew, why are we avoiding this? Like what pain point are we avoiding? Is there something going on beneath the surface? Like the music, maybe it's that they're afraid of that they're not going to sound good, or people are going to judge them, or it might be like harder than they think to. We have these ideas of what it looks like, but what is that journey really gonna feel like? And these tools that I help my clients with, like, help that journey feel more seamless and fun and exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is ultimately, it's not that you don't have enough time. It's not that there's any, like, if it really came down to it, if we put our minds to it, there's little we can't do without, what it takes is the time, the focus, the energy. And I think a little bit of what you're talking about, like a little bit of that willingness to be judged. Right. I think for a lot of people, I'm curious about what you would think, what you would say to someone who is a CEO. I think that at the end of the day, like, what it really boils down to is you could be at the pinnacle of what most people would call success and still be unhappy. You could be a CEO, you could be a founder for a company, you could be making high 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, it doesn't matter the amount of money. And I've seen these people and I've known them in my life, where I see they're, a vice president for a company I worked at, and miserable day in, day out, miserable to be around, treat other people like they don't care about you, don't exist. And it's really coming from a place of deep unhappiness. That is what I sense in those people. I'm curious what, and I feel like everyone can relate to a certain degree. There's just something off that. And I'm curious what you would say to someone who is at the pinnacle of exterior success. They got the house, they got all the cars, they're the CEO, but something is still not quite right. Yeah.
And a lot of times I think they're kind of afraid to take the foot off the gas a bit because they're afraid of this, beautiful, grand expression that they've created. It'll just kind of fall apart, right? Or if they actually address that one thing that's been a pain point for a very long time, and they feel that, they're afraid of what it's going to do, right? And so there's like avoid. And again, we can only do that for so long, and then it shows up, like that ripple effect of the inner world expressed and showing up as the outer world. Unhappy on the inside, treating people poorly on the outside, right? And so I guess what I'm here to say is that it can be very safe, and it doesn't have to take a very long time to make some of these real deep shifts. And sometimes, like, there is some real soul searching about what you really want, and getting comfortable that it may look very different than what you currently have. And surrendering to, at the end of the day, like, what is deep happiness for yourself? Is it all these things that you've ticked off the list that you've shown to others how successful you are? What does that mean if you're deeply unhappy on the inside? Is that success for you? And if we can take a moment to look at, if you're having a hard time taking your foot off the brake because when you were younger, maybe you didn't have all this stuff, and even though it may seem irrational, you're deathly afraid of going back to that. When we can address that, right, perhaps through hypnosis, through some of this type of mindset work, then there's a deeper sense of ease. And that ease is going to show up also in the body, right? Like in not having heart disease and just having a healthy body, right? Like these things that show up, like people have migraines, they've got like tension in the body, they're grinding their teeth, they're not sleeping well at night, like all of that stuff. Like we can alleviate when we alleviate. That's literally the subconscious coming through, right? So as we're like stretching out the jaw,
dude. I need to go to the dentist. I grind my teeth. I still don't know what's going on with that.
Dentist is a good business. Yeah. So a lot of that can be alleviated when we just allow ourselves to go beneath the surface, like just enough to come to center, like to ask those questions, what it is that I really want, and just surrender a little bit that it's going to be okay. Like we are going to be supported. If things are meant to fall apart, right? Like there's intention in that. Like I know someone I worked with who literally stepped out of his Wall Street job to start seeding and funding wellness ventures. Super happy now. He came super unhappy, did the sway test, did the vision casting, made a big decision, is not unhappy about that at all. Like, is like living his best life.
Wow.
And he attributes it to like this kind of like coming home moment, and is just, he could just be still caught in that rat race, right? Unhappy, stressed out, not sleeping. And instead he gets to seed something which is like really it's a legacy. He actually gets to step into a legacy that he can really own.
Oh man, I mean, we could dive into legacy building. I mean, because ultimately, I think that as I shift further away from the external like desires and more finding that coming home, finding that time to like do the work with you, do that inner meditation work with myself, and really start to sit in with who I really am, like the why I'm here, like what is my life gonna mean at the end of all of it is really what I find myself asking more. I think about death a lot, Stephanie. I think about it too much.
Yeah.
No, but I think that it's good to think about it, because the more we start to think about the work, like the purpose and living in our full expression, you know, and I think that at the end of the day, when I leave this earth, if I can look back and go, I made a difference.
Yeah.
You know, my existence here wasn't in vain. Like all the struggling that I went through had a purpose, and that I could leave the world somewhat of a better, even for one person.
And I know we've talked about this, and it's, you know, for you, it comes to the heart, like with your family and your brother. And I feel like the work that we're doing here can help you amplify the results. Like, for example, you know, moving away from that idea of, if I am uber successful monetarily, I will lose connections. And as we release that, you know, making that monetary success is leaving the legacy for your family, for your brother, right? And so we get to amplify your results rather than like fighting your own self for the results that you desire, right? We get to amplify those. And that to me is what's available to everyone. Like, you can be successful. You can be, that's the whole point. Like, right? Like we do live in a world that is abundant. So we do get to access that. And I feel like it's really important to recognize, like, I think there's, again, this idea that, well, if you're living your passion, then you don't get to have that success that you would if you were on the grind. And it's absolutely not true. I mean, you can find examples all day. Like, this is, again, your mind is going to show you the evidence that is going to support your underlying belief system. Right? And if you say, like, I want to live my passion and I want to be monetarily successful, and once again, through hypnosis, we help match those up, right? We're always going to be, the subconscious is going to want to be incongruence. So when we get to match those up, we get to see the evidence, right? And then we get to receive that. It's really no different than you're looking to buy a car. You're like, I'm going to say, there's like so many Teslas. I was going to say Tesla, but there's so many on the road. Let me go with something else, like a green Volvo, okay? A green Volvo station wagon. You really want a green Volvo station wagon. Like, suddenly you're going to see them on the road everywhere because, like, you're attuned towards it. You're like, that's what I want. There's evidence that they exist. You're like, oh, you're not looking at it until it's on your radar. It's like this house, like, it came onto our radar, and then the evidence of it existing showed up for us. So it's very similar in, getting into alignment. It's like weeding out those things that are kind of getting in the way of that success, and then allowing you to just kind of free flow towards it.
It's kind of like skydiving.
It is.
Just got to jump. Just got to make the jump.
It is. And you have the parachute. That's like having the guides, having the guidance.
No, you got the backup parachute too.
Yes, you got the parachute. Yeah. I really do think also, like, having the coach is really important because, I have a coach too. I mean, I know this is what helps. They can help us see that which is hard for us to see ourselves. And I know for me, the more I've gotten attuned with connecting with my inner guides, with my guidance, and also, being really intentional about that which I desire, like, the more that can show up for me, I
think coaching has been probably the single, like, driving factor to my success in every, like, moment looking back through my 20s, as I started to push into entrepreneurship, as I started to, found my first companies and, like, do that. My first, like, months where I was like, I went from, like, making a few thousand to then, like, my first 10K month to then my first 30K month to then more recently now, like, first 50K a month, those all came from when I had really solid coaches who had my back, and really just a bounce board, like really having someone to bounce ideas off of. So I'm not operating in a silo, and that alone is very valuable. But then on top of it, when you throw in a very intentional coach who knows what they're doing and is like a surgeon and knows how to get into your subconscious, I mean, that's where, I mean, I'd love to ask you about maybe some of your clients, you know, like what would you say would be one, if there's one standout, you know, specifically with what you specialize with, which was like CEOs, founders, career professionals, maybe like if there's like one standout story.
Yeah, it's like I have some who they will work with me for years because they can see how much it helps them accelerate their results and see what they can't see for themselves, right? Like where to put the focus. And so I can think of one who is a CEO of her own company. And there was a time when she was, you know, as an intuitive, I could really see this international growth for her and her company that it wasn't at the time. It was really just to some markets within the US. And as a woman in this very male-dominated field, she was kind of feeling it. And so we did some work around some of those limiting beliefs and where they came from. We did some intuitive work with some of her guides and her guidance and like the big picture reason, the big why she's doing this work, like for the sake of what. And she was able to go into some of these meetings, especially with vision casting, and to land these international accounts. To like, she's just exploded the business. She's got international investors. She's got international accounts. She's got these business incubators that are happening. And this has all happened like in the last year for her.
That's amazing. Could you quantify that?
Quantify it.
Yeah, is it quantifiable? Like what
in terms
kind of
of
like difference in revenue?
You could ask her yourself. You're going to meet with her later. So.
Perfect. We'll throw it into the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so curious. Really about you're now at this point. I think you've come to a place where you are like ready yourself. Like you are specialized in what you do and who you help. So like I'm curious if there's a way for you to like summarize who you help and what you help them with.
Yeah, it really is mainly women, some men as well, who are leaders in their field. They're business owners, they're CEOs. They may be transitioning into entrepreneurship from that. And they understand that they have some subconscious blocks or clarity that they really desire to manifest like their big vision. And they're ready to get there.
So how do they contact you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, stephaniezito.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Just you can find my name. There's also a meditation app that I like to go live on called Insight Timer. So I have some guided meditations there, as well as going live. Usually Sunday I have my soul sessions, so you can find me there too.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to continue working with you because in just 2 sessions, it's really shifted things for me.
That's amazing. I'm glad to hear it.
The work we're doing is I can see the path starting to just get like brighter and brighter, really, you know, the brighter future ahead, you know, so. Well,
and I love meeting with people one-on-one just for a complimentary intuitive manifesting session also. So we can drop a link for people if they'd like to get a complimentary 20 minutes with me.
Oh, that's so generous.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's awesome.
We can dive in. We can pretty quickly dive into what's the deepest block is and what the highest purpose is for someone.
I highly recommend that to like everyone I know. I'm going to, but like already, like I just the other day I was in the truck and we were driving to downtown LA, and I just mentioned the work you do and the work we've been doing together to like 2 of my friends and my girlfriend, and all of them were like, that sounds amazing. And also like just through hearing like my quick snippet of the work we had done and like some of the things I had realized, they're like, you're like unlocking stuff for me right now. Like, whoa, like yes. You're like, I'm like starting to realize some of the self-sabotage and some stuff that like, so the fact that you're like a 20 minutes with you, I think everyone should take that up because that's great. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're helping your friends too through the work we're doing together. Yeah, that's how it goes.
Like the ripple effects, really.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So anyways, thank you so much, Steph, for your time.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you again for watching. If you haven't yet, There's one thing that I could ask in return. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, I'm gonna go ahead and leave a link in the description so that anyone who is interested can connect with Stephanie. Definitely recommend following her on socials. She posts a ton of valuable content. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, for those of you who are looking for a guide, and I'm excited for the next Story Driven podcast. I'm planning on posting these probably bi-weekly, maybe weekly. We'll see how much extra time I've got, and ultimately we'll see what type of guests raise their hands and want to be on the show. I'm super grateful and excited to have you along for this journey. Thanks for joining. I'll see you next time.